Warning: the Hayes Nation may stimulate personal growth and prosperity. Participation is strongly advised.
Well, today on the show, this is going to be a good one. You're going to want to stick around for all of it in its entirety. First, we're going to talk about the reasons people say they can't get ahead. And then later, I'm going to tell you why I believe you can and you will. All that and more, and it starts right now. Sorry, I forgot to hit the mute button there. I'm your host, George Hayes, and welcome to the George Hayes Radio Podcast. A little technical glitch to get the episode started. Look, I'm a one-man show, so I am producing, I am hosting, I am running the board, I'm doing everything by myself, so I guess we'll glitch every now and then. So welcome to the show. We're broadcasting from the Bama One podcast studio in the great state of Alabama. And look, I want to hear from you, okay? So reach out to me at georgehayes@usa.com, georgehayes@usa.com. I want to hear your story, where you're at. Are you building a life of wealth and prosperity? You know, you're working hard, you're focused on success. And how is that going? And what are your future plans? I want to hear those stories. And if you're the opposite side, you're struggling or, you just can't get ahead, I want to hear that too. But when you send me those kind of notes, just give me at least one or two things that you're doing to try to turn it around. Help me out a little bit, okay? I really want to hear your stories. And who knows, I may focus your story on a future broadcast. Now, comments are always welcome on YouTube. That is the video portion of the show. The show is also available on all podcast platforms, at least most of them anyways. We're trying to get it out to everyone we possibly can. And then as far as social media is concerned, you can follow me at one place, and that's on X, and it's Real George Hayes. Real George Hayes on X if you want to follow me over there. Love to have you. And last but not least, and this is the most important because everything I just stated, you can find at hayesnation.com. That is the main home for this show, hayesnation.com. We're building a community of like-minded individuals who want to live a life of faith, freedom, and prosperity. And, when you go there, there's all kinds of information there. There's support. I try to post as much as I can there to help you build a life of prosperity. And you can have conversations with other folks. And, you might find somebody who is strong in one area and another person who's stronger in another area. When we get together, it's just working as a team always helps, and building community, obviously, in the Lord's name is never a bad thing. So head over to hayesnation.com and you won't be sorry that you did. Now, before I dive into this episode, okay, I'm going to, and I titled the intro, The Reasons People Say They Can't Get Ahead. And the second segment of today's show, I'm going to tell you why I believe you can and you will. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through what the top structural economic barriers are that people talk about, okay? And, as to why they can't get ahead. And there's no judging here, okay? And I'll be quite frank, I agree with like 99% of it. I understand the pain. And look, it affects me too. Now, I don't trade my time and labor for money anymore, but I have investments and I have a lifestyle that I'd like to keep, okay? So these topics are important to me as well. So when we get to the second segment, I am going to kind of counter some of these, but I'm not going to do it in a negative way. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I'm going to try to give you a different way of looking at it. And hopefully it will help you to start planning and how to, and working through these issues. Okay. And look, this isn't the first time that we've had, you could call it a downturn in the economy or a difficult economy, a sideways economy. This isn't the first time. In my lifetime, I've seen it go up and down, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. It is real. It is valid. So let's go ahead. Let's just dive right in, okay? Now, when we talk about the top structural economic barriers that people talk about, let's start with income versus inflation, okay? Because this is probably one of the biggest ones. And you'll hear people say things like, no matter how hard I work, it's not enough, or it's never enough, okay? This is the number one complaint everywhere across all social media. And yes, I checked. This is like the biggest complaint, okay? Wages are not keeping pace with the cost of living, and most Americans feel like they're being left behind even if they're working full time. And only 12% of workers say that their pay has kept up with inflation, and 92% are cutting back spending, even on essentials like groceries, healthcare, because costs have soared so high. Now, there are some parts of the economy as of this broadcast where things are getting better. Gas has come down quite a bit, but we'll save that conversation for another episode. Okay, when it comes to income versus inflation, you'll hear people online say things like this: I work 40 plus hours a week, but I still can't save. Or prices go up, but wages don't. These are the things that people say when they talk about income versus inflation, okay? Then we have housing costs. Housing costs are crushing savings. This is another big complaint. High rents and the inability to save after paying housing bills shows up constantly in social media conversations. And a Harvard study showed that 65% of renters can't afford basic living costs once the rent is covered. And again, on social media, quotes are quite typical of this sentiment. You'll hear things like, read things like, rent ate my raises, or I'll never own a home. And just so you know, in preparation for this, all of these are real. I went out and handpicked all of these because I wanted to get the right quotes and the things that people are saying. Now, the next thing we have is the paycheck to paycheck reality. Nearly half of Americans report living paycheck to paycheck, and many feel like any small surprise, any tiny little surprise expense at all will derail their progress. And surveys show that over 50% feel like something always sets them back. Now, online, people echo things like, every time I save a little, a crisis hits. Or, the smallest things ruin my budget. Now, debt is a long shadow, okay? Let me repeat that. Debt is a long shadow. People frequently cite debt. Credit cards, student loans, medical costs, as a chain that they cannot break. And even older generations are saying that debt is keeping them from retiring. Okay? Now, on social media, common things that we hear are, I can't get ahead because I'm paying interest forever. Or if debt disappears overnight, I'd feel free. I'd break free of those chains, right? And yes, being debt-free is the goal. You want to break that cycle, but we'll get into that. You know, the next category is cultural and behavioral reasons people blame, okay? Now, I have a note here. Social media sucks time and it drains focus. And on this show, I will constantly repeat about the social media thing, about your time being spent on screens, watching stuff that doesn't benefit you, doesn't do anything for your financial or any other prosperity in your life, mentally, physically, spiritually. None of this stuff does, right? And many on Reddit and other platforms argue that constant digital distractions steals time and ambition, leaving people mentally exhausted and unfocused on goals. And I agree with this. Social media, you'll hear things like, okay, and this is when I say, when you hear things like this, these are actual quotes. Again, I handpicked. Social media wastes hours I could spend building skills. Now, I chose this one for a reason, okay? Because this is an actual comment that somebody wrote. Social media wastes hours I could spend building skills. Now, here's a person who's they've got part of the equation. They've identified the problem, but they need to fix it. They need a solution. What's the solution? Stop wasting all the hours on social media and start spending that time building the skills. Again, that one just really stood out to me. Now let's move to perception of progress. Everything feels harder than it used to. That's what people say. There's a reoccurring theme online that modern life is just more stressful, more expensive, and harder to make meaningful upward movement in. Some even call it post-pandemic decline or societal reset. That's really funny because the elitists, and I call them elitists, not the elites, the people with the bankers, the people with the power, with the money, okay, they do want a social reset. That's what they're trying to do. We don't need a social reset or societal reset. I'm sorry, I said social. We don't need a societal reset. We need to go back to basic common sense. But I digress. We're not to that part of the show yet. Okay, so some people call it post-pandemic decline or societal reset, and you'll hear comments like this. It feels like nothing is stable anymore. I see people drowning financially everywhere I look. Excuse me. And then we have mental health and uncertainty. People openly talk about anxiety and are overwhelmed around finances, and not just the math, but the emotional drain of never feeling secure. Studies in other countries show similar patterns. Financial stress is topping mental health complaints, especially among younger generations. I apologize. Today I've got something here stuck in my throat, but we'll get through it, right? And you know, this scares me, and I have a lot of empathy, because if you feel like everything's just coming down on you, and especially if you don't have the tools or the equipment, if you weren't taught how to deal with it, it can be crushing. And, it can put you in a place of despair. And it's a real thing. And it's happening all across our country. Now, next, let's look at sentiments from news stories, okay? And surveys, okay? I've included both here. This is how people officially describe why they feel stuck. Now, first up is economic pessimism, okay? Polls show that only 25% believe they still have a decent shot at improving their standard of living. That is the lowest in decades. Only 25% of people think they have a shot. People see housing affordability, job uncertainty, slow wage growth, and inflation as structural roadblocks. Now, another one. And again, we're still talking about sentiment from surveys and news. Uncertainty is a confidence killer. About 57% say economic uncertainty makes long-term goals impossible, including managing or paying down debt. Now, let's talk about something here. And that's financial literacy, because this plays into all this. And what is financial literacy? Well, first of all, let me couch it to you this way. Financial literacy versus knowing what to do, okay? Surveys indicate that while people are motivated to improve financially, a large portion aren't sure how to manage more effectively. This gets cited as a personal barrier on social media all the time. Now, here are some more common social media narratives. These are things that we hear all the time, okay? And I've broken it up, okay? So let's talk about structural commentary. Structural commentary, we hear things like economic conditions have shifted. It's not just me. Or another said, no job security anymore. Or inflation is eating into my future. Now, under personal and behavioral, we get comments like, I can't focus because everything online is a distraction. Or I feel like I have less time and more pressure than older generations. And then finally, I'm trying to save, but something always comes up. Something comes up to block it, right? And then the last one is the emotional, okay? People say things like, life feels harder than it did before. Or I feel stuck, even though I'm doing everything right. And then another said, hope feels like a luxury. And again, all of this is real. This is how people feel about what's going on in our economy today and in the social environment, okay? Now, what it all adds up to, okay? People don't point to just one thing. As you can see, I just went through a whole list. They surface a mix of economic forces, cultural pressures, behavioral traps, and emotional exhaustion. The dominant message in 2025 and heading now into 2026 is not just about effort anymore. The rules of the economy and society have shifted, and a lot of people feel like they're running on a treadmill with the incline turned all the way up. Man, that's a lot of pressure. Now, in my own life, it's always been hard. And yet I retired, or walked away at least, not in full retirement, but I mean, I'm not trading my time and labor for money anymore at age 58. because I wasn't distracted by social media or anything else. I just worked. I lived within my means, and I saved, and then I invested. And, you know, in the later part of my career, because I've only been I sold off the last of my business. It's going to be 3.5, almost 4 years now. Okay. When I walked away. Okay. So, but to get there, I lived within my means. I saved and then I invested. And I did all that with a very meager beginning. I did eventually end up owning my own company. It took 40 years to get there. And I was smart. I made some investments to where I don't have to trade my time and labor for a paycheck anymore. Now, I personally take a clear position right up front. Most of today's I can't get ahead narrative is real pressure mixed with learned helplessness. And we're going to get into that more in the second segment, so just bear with me. The economy is tougher in spots. It's better in certain areas of the country, not so good in others, okay? But the idea that progress is impossible, I believe, is flat out wrong. And why? Because I'm living proof. I literally came from nothing. And it took me a while to get there. And as I've said on the show, building wealth takes time. My career spanned 40 years. Takes time. Now, next up, I'm going to counter everything we just discussed. Okay? And again, I'm not countering to be mean. I'm not being dismissive because, as I said, I understand this pain that people are feeling. But there are ways that we can move forward to build a life that's prosperous. We're going to discuss that and we're going to dive into it, so you don't want to miss it. I'm your host, George Hayes, and I'll be right back.
You're listening to the George Hayes Radio Podcast.
Faith, freedom, and prosperity. Those are not just words. They are the foundation to building a life of success and wealth. Faith is what grounds us, reminds us of our purpose, and gives us the strength to keep going forward even when things get tough. Freedom? Well, that's what's great about this country. The freedom to dream big, to take risks, and to do something that matters. And prosperity? Well, that's the net benefit when you give all the glory to Him. God wants us to thrive and prosper. This is why I created the George Hayes Radio Podcast. Every episode is packed with practical advice, motivation, and tools to help keep you grounded in faith, celebrate your freedom, and live a prosperous life. Now, if you're enjoying the show, do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button and share with a friend. And go to HayesNation.com to be part of a community of people who live these values every day. And remember, faith is your foundation. Freedom gives you room to grow, and prosperity is the blessing.
Hayes. The George Hayes Radio Podcast wants to hear from you. Tell us what motivates you or describe that obstacle standing in your way. You could be featured on an upcoming episode. Send your story via email to georgehayes@usa.com. That's georgehayes@usa.com.
right, well, welcome back to segment 2 of the George Hayes Radio Podcast. So glad you stuck around. And listen, I hope that this is a blessing for you, that these episodes are helping you, and I hope that the Lord is in your heart, that you're reaching out to Him for guidance. Spend some reflective time in prayer with the Lord on all of these things that we discuss on this show. It will definitely help you get your path straight. Now, if you want to reach me, it's georgehayes@usa.com. I'd love to hear from you. I want to hear your stories of success. You have those of you who are struggling. If you want to leave comments, we're on YouTube at the George Hayes Radio Podcast, or you can follow me on X at Real George Hayes. And finally, go to HayesNation.com. We're building a community of like-minded individuals just like you. You want wealth, you want to build prosperity, this is the place to go. You'll find all the episodes for the show, tools and information to help you on your journey, and you can work with others who can encourage and support you. And they're people just like you. They want to build this life. There's no reason for you to not become part of the Hayes Nation. So go to HayesNation.com. Okay. All right. We got all that out of the way. Are we ready? Okay. Because now we're going to kind of counter the first segment. Okay. And it's not exactly in order. Okay. But I've chosen my counters carefully because what I want to do is I want to give you some optimism. And I want to show you that there are other ways to think through this stuff, okay? And that there is always hope, okay? There's one line in there where somebody said where it feels like there's no hope. There's always hope. And, there's hope, praise the Lord through Him. There's always a path. He can make anything happen. Okay, so we talked about the reasons that people say they can't get ahead. Now I'm going to tell you why I believe you can and you will. Okay? I have confidence in you that if you take this seriously, you can start to make tiny incremental changes in your life that will set you on the road to prosperity. So here we go. All right? Now, let's first do this. Let's talk about this. Separating headwinds from handcuffs, okay? And yes, people face headwinds. Things like higher housing costs, inflation spikes, and more noise and distraction in the world than ever in history today. I will give this generation that no generation's ever had to deal with this much noise coming at you from all different directions. But here's the thing. Headwinds, they just slow you down. They don't stop forward motion. What stops people is when headwinds become excuses. You cannot let all of these things happening in the world become the excuse for why you can't get ahead. Now, let me just give you a very animated example. Well, inflation's high, the economy sucks, I'm screwed, I'm out. You can't do that. You've got to push forward, even in a strong headwind, okay? Now, I personally didn't have an easy era that I grew up in, okay? I dealt with really high inflated interest rates. We had fewer tech tools. We had way less access to information. And let me tell you something. The information that the average person has today on this gadget that you grab, that cell phone or a computer, you have almost all the world's information at your fingertips. In my generation, if you wanted that kind of power, you would have had to buy the Encyclopedia Britannica. Yeah, it's books. Yeah, big, giant, thick books. And it would fill your entire living room if you had the entire collection. And if you had the entire collection, the moment you purchased the last edition for that issue, it would have been outdated. That's all we had. We also had no side hustle economy. That didn't exist. And we certainly didn't have YouTube gurus spoon feeding all kinds of strategies. I mean, it's a real blessing to be able to have a platform where we can have this discussion and hopefully educate each other about what's going on out there and get some education about what we can do to fix things. Okay. And even though I didn't have I had all those obstacles, I still won. I got ahead. I consider myself a winner. Like I said, I'm not a green tea guru telling you that, look, I made $20 million trading stocks. Follow my plan and I'll show you how to do it too, right? That's not what's going on here. Okay. I'm more of like your biggest fan. I'm your cheerleader. Okay. I'm here as just, a part-time coach just to help get you in the right direction. Okay. And I certainly never saw any headwinds or anything like that as a reason to quit. Okay. So let me get to my first official counter, number one. Let's talk about the structural. And let me make this comment here. Okay. The economy is rigged. Okay. It always has been. It's nothing new. Okay. That there's nothing new about how things operate. Depending on who we elect, who's in charge, the banks always control the money. The ultra uber elitists of the world certainly have their impact on things. Okay. And, like in today's current society, social engineering is their big pet project. Okay. But there's always been a rigging of some kind. There's always, and I call it corruption. Okay. There's lots of that. Okay. And every generation believes that the system has turned against them. Okay. Now, for me in the 70s, we had stagflation. You want to talk about bad? I remember lines of cars. Okay. I was still pretty young. Lines of cars waiting to get gas. We used to get gas by I think it was the last digit of your license plate, odds and evens. On certain days, the odds could get gas, and on other days, the evens could get gas. That's how bad it was. And I'm not talking about small lines. I'm talking about miles long lines of cars waiting to get gasoline. In the 80s, we had double-digit interest rates. Interest rates were ridiculous in the 80s. In the 90s, we had massive downsizing and outsourcing that occurred in this country. When you make a call to a call center now and you get somebody in some other country, right? We all know that gig and how that works, right? That all began in the 90s with a massive downsizing of American workforce, and then it was outsourced to foreign countries. And then in the 2000s, we had the dot-com crash, early 2000s. What a disaster that was. And then later on in 2008, we had the mortgage crisis. The whole mortgage thing collapsed and imploded on itself. And now in the 2020s, we have, inflation and asset bubbles. Now, this all means, let me just take a second before I continue here. Okay. The economy is cyclical. It goes up and it goes down. And when we become financially literate and when we pay attention, we can learn how to ride these waves to the high notes and how to protect ourselves on the way down to the low notes. And it's just something I want to throw out there, okay? Now, the big difference today versus when I was dealing with things like stagflation, double-digit interest rates, et cetera, is that people today narrate their struggle publicly instead of privately working through it. Now, personal progress doesn't necessarily require a fair system. I'm telling you, I agree with you, okay? The system's not fair. But here's the thing. Disciplined behavior inside the reality of the system you are in is required. You can complain about it, and you can put your head in the sand. You can choose to quit. You can choose to give up, or you can learn how to work within the system and how to make it work for you. Okay? Now, here's my counter number 2. Wages don't keep up. Okay? And this is true. But spending always finds a way to outrun wages. And that bears repeating. I want you to hear me on this, okay? Spending always finds a way to outrun wages, okay? Now, for me, I didn't win by making a massively huge salary or timing markets perfectly or getting lucky once. I didn't hit the lottery or anything like that, okay? I won by doing boring things repeatedly. Living below by my means, okay? I lived below my means. Save first, not last. Invest steadily. Once you learn how to save, you learn how to invest, and you do it steadily. And avoid lifestyle inflation, okay? Now, this is important, okay? I'm going to read something to you, okay? I'm going to read it. This is the definition of lifestyle inflation. The tendency for individuals to increase their spending as their income rises, which can hinder their ability to save and achieve financial goals. This often leads to living paycheck to paycheck despite having a higher income. That's called lifestyle inflation. Now, let me give you a quick story, okay? I was in the telecommunications business, specifically in the construction and operation of large telecommunication networks, basically building fiber optics, okay? And I'm talking about the stuff on the telephone poles, big bundles of wires, right? On poles, digging up streets, that kind of thing, okay? That was the stuff that I was focused on, okay? And there would be, in that industry, there would be contractors that would do like 90% of the work, the actual heavy lifting, okay? And it's very easy, if you put your mind to it, to become a contractor. You can go get your license, and if you can get some money up, get a few pieces of equipment, go out and get a contract. I witnessed countless people that I knew personally and acquaintances with who rose from absolutely nothing, built a contracting empire, and lost all of it due to lifestyle inflation. Because here's what happened. They were used to living paycheck to paycheck. They had this great idea. They were going to be a contractor. There was all this work going on, constructing all of this, backbone for, telecommunications. They'd get lots of work, and their teams would grow. And the first thing they would do is they would buy a house. They'd buy a bigger house than the house that they were in. And then they'd buy a car, and then a second car, and a third car, and then they'd buy boats and RVs. Next thing you know, they buy a vacation house, and they are just in debt up to their eyeballs. They are just spending and borrowing, and they lose sight. Rather than living modestly and taking those rewards of your success and investing them somewhere where the money starts making more money. I mean, think about that. Wouldn't it be better than you trading your time and labor for money than to have your money actually making money? That's a much better place to be in, okay? Now, back to our topic. Most people today don't lose to inflation. They lose to normalization of excess. And what does that mean, normalization of excess? Well, things like subscription creep. You know, you make a couple extra bucks. Well, I can afford a few new subscriptions. Car payments as a lifestyle. Now, I've talked about this on a previous episode. You do not need the most expensive car on the lot. You don't need to go pay full sticker price and all that comes with a brand new car when you drive it off the lot and the depreciation hits the moment you leave their driveway. You don't need to do that, but these are things that people do. Convenience replacing discipline. When you start to make more money, the first thing you do is the conveniences start to replace your discipline. You start to lose your discipline. Okay? Let me put it this way. Yes, inflation hurts, but undisciplined consumption kills. And I want you to think about that. If you're in a position where you've just gotten a raise, or maybe you've started a new job that's paying more, just because you're making that increase doesn't mean that you need to spend it all. Start thinking about your future. And I've got news for you. We all grow old. You are not going to be young forever. So the younger you get this in your head and the sooner you start doing this, the better off you're going to be. Get the discipline in your brain that it takes to stop spending to your paycheck. All right, let's move on. Everything costs too much. This is my counter number 3, okay? And this is exactly why focus matters more than ever. If everything costs too much or more than it ever has, you have to be more focused than you've ever been before. Okay? Social media didn't invent hardship. It's amplified distraction. That's what it is. Okay? I didn't do well because times were easier. I did well because I wasn't comparison shopping my life, okay? I didn't need to feel good every Friday. I didn't outsource motivation to short dopamine hits to the brain by purchasing every little thing that I saw. And I wasn't emotionally spending my money to cope with things. Today, attention is the most expensive luxury people give away for free. I let that hang for a second because I want you to think about that. Today, attention, your attention is the most expensive luxury that you give away for free. All right, we're moving on. Okay, counter number 4, it's mentally exhausting. And so is being broke at age 65. You want to talk about being exhausted? Get to 65 and have nothing but some lint and a couple of nickels in your pocket. That's going to be mentally exhausting. That's why we work hard when we're younger. Now, I don't personally have any sympathy for people who feel like they shouldn't have to work, but yet live, these glamorous life. Like somehow somebody else should pay for it. I have no sympathy, no empathy for it. And I have no interest in talking to people about that. Okay. Because we need to work hard now so that we can make our life better. So, yeah, the grind is tiring, but working forever is also tiring, or depending just on Social Security, or stressing out about money every month, or being one medical bill away from total destruction. Okay? You need to learn how to choose temporary discomfort over permanent anxiety. It still works, even today, and it always will. But it bears repeating. You need to learn how to choose temporary discomfort over permanent anxiety. So you know what? So you can't have 3 70-inch TVs in the house, and you can't have 50 subscriptions to all this stuff. And, you can't be on 5 different gambling sites, and you can't do all of this stuff. Okay? You got to give some of it up. It's got to be a little discomfort. All right. Counter number 5. I don't know how. Okay? And this is what a lot of people say. I don't know how. I don't know how to get ahead. And my simple response is that information isn't scarce. Execution is. I mean, I just get done telling you, right now you have all the power of the world's information at your fingertips. I didn't have that. You've got to dig for the information. You've got to educate yourself. I've talked about this about skills, right? If you're stuck in a job where you're just not going to get anywhere, if you stay there for 20 years, you're really never going to get anywhere, right? You have got to build some skills that makes you worth more to employers. Okay? Now, let's continue on the I don't know. People don't lack financial advice. They don't lack investment advice. They don't lack budgeting tools, and they don't lack education. That's what I just said. Okay? Here's what people lack: patience, consistency, willingness to abstain from impulsive behavior, and tolerance for being unimpressive while building. Now, think about that for a second. A tolerance for being unimpressive while building. Now, that was me. See, I don't care what people think. If I'm driving down the road in some old jalopy, right? Look at that crappy car, right? I don't care. I don't care. My money is working for me. And it's allowing me to live comfortably. That's what I care about. So I'm not really worried about impressing anybody. So you need to develop a tolerance for being unimpressive. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses. If your neighbor buys a boat, you don't need to buy a boat. In fact, if your neighbor buys a boat, go for boat rides with him. Let him deal with all the expenses. Now, I didn't walk away at 58 by accident. I got there because I played a long, quiet game. Nobody noticed me. I just kept saving and putting it away, saving it and putting it away, refraining from spending until I got to a point where I could invest that money to make it work for me. Now, this is my core counter message. I'm calling this the hammer, okay? And I'm going to read some of this to you, okay? Progress to building wealth is not blocked. There is no wall. Wealth, no matter the generation, takes time and patience and a willingness to learn. The path still works. In an earlier episode, I said, I'm going to still say old-fashioned things that I know are going to tick people off. Well, dust yourself off. pick yourself up by your bootstraps, right? You know, get in here, good old fashioned grit. I'm still going to say that stuff, okay? Because it still works and it's still required. Ask anybody of any true success, any millionaire out there, or anybody who's has built up a wealth portfolio where they can live comfortably. Ask them how easy it was to do. It's not easy, but you have to have a willingness to change your mindset and just, face some facts. You're going to have to work hard. And like I said, the younger you are and the sooner you start this, the better off you're going to be. Now, in this path, you need to earn, control spending, save consistently, invest patiently, and repeat this longer than it feels comfortable. It gets uncomfortable. But that's what wealth building is. Now, most people don't fail because the ladder is gone, okay? They fail because they won't climb something that doesn't give instant feedback. We live in this world of instant gratification. Gotta have it, gotta have it. Oh, they've got it, I gotta have it. This instant gratification is why people fail, because they refuse to get on the earn, control, save, invest, and repeat. Now, I didn't walk away early because life was easy. I didn't walk away early because I refused to be distracted. Okay? I refused to inflate my lifestyle, and I refused to believe that hard meant impossible. In fact, I'll be honest with you. These are new concepts because for pretty much all of human history, right? The word hard and working hard has been part of the equation. And I do not believe it's going to change anytime soon, at least for anybody who wants to build wealth. And in the environment we're in, you've got to pay attention and you've got to work hard, okay? The game hasn't changed, folks, okay? The noise has. And that's why I repeat over and over and over and over. You've got to learn how to tune out all this noise. You've got to turn those gadgets off and stop looking at them and stop relying on them to entertain you. That dopamine rush that you get from watching, I don't know, whatever videos you're watching or, you got to get your nose in a book. Learn how to invest. Learn about real estate. Learn how money works. Learn what do wealthy people do, and start learning what they do and start living like they do. Let me leave you with this today, okay? I'm going to leave you with Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And one more, okay? Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Praise the Lord. Now, I hope that this episode helped some of you out there. I really do. I hope this was a blessing for you. I do this because I want to point these things out to you. Go back and play it over and over a couple of times if you have to. Learn to live within your means. It's very important. Learn new skills. If you're not where you want to be in life, it's never too late to change direction. And I'm going to tell you something else, okay? The younger you are, the sooner you start this, the sooner you understand this and you get this stuff, the better off you're going to be. I want stories of people that are able to stop trading their time and labor for money at age 40. How amazing would that be? I mean, I sure wish I could do it. And I'll let you in on a little secret. My target was 55. I missed it by 3 years. But I was willing to continue to work and do what I had to do to get to my goal. Okay, that's it for today. Remember, work hard, educate yourself, learn to save and invest. God loves you. I love you. Have a blessed day. Remember to keep that train rolling down the tracks, okay? Because that light at the end of the tunnel just might be you. I'm your host, George Hayes. I will see you next time.
It's time to smash that like button and subscribe. To share or leave comments, log on to YouTube at the George Hayes Radio Podcast or visit us online at HayesNation.com.